I want to work with you specifically. Like, I don't want to work with who you think you should be or whatever that is. Like, and it was this acceptance thing of like, I accept you for what you bring to the table in this relationship. Welcome back to the Diaries of a Witch podcast. My name is Angelica Crashi, and today we have a really exciting topic and we have a guest. So I want to introduce Emmy, and how about take it away and tell the people who you are and what you do, Emmy.
Well, thank you for having me. So I'm Emmy. I whittle it down to three main things that I do: storyteller, witch, final girl. I have been a death doula for, it's going to be a decade in April. So we've been at it for a minute. And yeah, I am a practicing witch. I have been kind of in and out of it for a while. Part of the topic idea, what got me interested in this whole thing is realizing how much my neurodivergence has impacted my practice, but also using my witchcraft to kind of help me to find new ways to self-regulate and also self-acceptance, and to find confidence that I feel is actually sustainable and true for me, as opposed to feeling like I'll pick up one mask, it won't work, and then I'll have to adopt another. So it's been really wonderful. And so much of my work too, I think, comes down to my kind of core belief of helping people be the youest you, finding what really is authentic to you. So I'm really excited to be here and to talk about my own experience, as well as how we could maybe help you all today.
Yes. And we are talking today about neurodivergence and witchcraft, and our experiences, as well as how you can make your witchcraft practice more in alignment with who you are, and instead of trying to like put yourself into a set of practices that might have been created for somebody else or works for somebody else, really creating like your own practice. And it's something that I'm super passionate about. I think that even maybe before I realized that I was neurodivergent, I found myself being like, you know what, this doesn't really work for me the way that other people are doing it, and I can't quite figure out why. And I've been really passionate, similarly to you, as like a witchcraft teacher, to assist other people with that same process and be like, no, don't worry. Like you don't have to do it like this person does, right? Have you experienced that in your practice as well? Almost like this feeling that it needs to be done a certain way, or, anything like that?
Oh, definitely. I think that comes down to, I did have a period where I've kind of yo-yoed back and forth, where I tried to be Catholic and witch. I tried to dabble in Wicca, and I thought maybe the rules would help me feel like I'm tapping into something, but it just made me, again, feel bad, or like I wasn't doing it right. And then I'd kind of taper out again. But I think a few things. I really valued being in your program of the heart, because it really got me thinking about evaluating everything that I'm really doing. And as a Libra rising, I adopt a lot of things, and I don't know, this audience that's invisible to me, but I feel like I perceive them, that maybe I'm doing the magic wrong, and that takes me out of it. It just really got me thinking about how many things I have on my altar in my practice that really are not for me. And I've been kind of slowly melding into chaos magic. I read through Condensed Chaos, Condensed Chaos by Phil Hine, and it really had me realizing how much I enjoyed being able to kind of build my own new systems, and that it's helped me kind of also both help me with unmasking my neurodivergence, but also kind of unmasking my practice, where I felt like it has to look a certain way versus what it actually is more often than not. Like, not that aesthetic witchcraft is not fun and it can look like that, but it often, I posted a reel about this, like, it looks so beautiful and ethereal, but it's really me whispering an intention and then shaking the hell out of a jar.
Yeah.
So it's like, it could be both, but but yeah, I've definitely felt that way. Even in the Lupercalia ritual, there's a portion that requires kind of a physical component. And it was the first time in a while that I clocked, oh, from a sensory perspective, I cannot do that.
Yeah.
Like it is totally taking me out of it. And that is going to compromise the actual spell work, the ritual. So I ended up finding a different way that did not feel like it was triggering a visceral reaction. So it's like,
Hmm.
oh, okay, now I know that that is not for me as a practitioner. So I've had a few different little cues over the past year of clocking that I'm neurodivergent, that I have different needs, and also that there are some things where I'm going to look for kind of a sensory experience to kind of get me in it, but some things will also completely take me out of it. So working
Yeah.
on removing those from my practice.
Yeah. I love that. That's awesome. And yeah, do you feel like you're kind of in this work now where that's something that you can tap into in the moment and be like, okay, this isn't for me. You know what I mean? Like, this is something I need to switch that aligns more with me. How do you feel like people who are listening can, whether it's through sensory stuff or other things, like, how do you think you'd recommend people identify these things and maybe make switches or swaps? I think for me, like, I felt a lot of almost like shame or like feelings of like, should I just do this or should I just like try this? Like, could this work for me? So yeah, I'm just curious to hear how you would maybe give advice for that process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I recommend doing maybe one of two things, either kind of following the dopamine of what feels exciting to you,
Mhm.
or kind of think about what you actually want out of whatever your ritual is. Like, what is the point? What is the point of this part of your practice? So really getting to the core of that, I think, is important, is like, why why do you want to do it, and who is it actually for? Is it for you, or do you feel like you should do it? I think is a really core piece of it too. And I think part of finding what will actually work best for you, I think, is thinking about your capacity. I know that not everyone is a human design person, but I'm a projector. So in reality, both between being autistic and also being a projector, I really should do less than what I do. Or at the very least, I need to get it down to a system that excites me. Otherwise, it's really not going to feel like, what am I really doing here? So it's like, I've noticed I used to be so adamant about, I got to do something for every full and new moon. And now it's like, you know what? If if it's just not hitting, I'm not going to do it. Allowing yourself to really follow the dopamine as an ADHD person is like, oh, that feels exciting to me. I also do have cues because as a neurodivergent person, I've been able to clock that transitions can be hard for me. So again, really thinking about what music helps you to get in that flow. Sometimes doesn't have to be that you wear like all white linen to show up to ritual. You could get a really bomb like black cloak if you want to, if that's going to help you, but you don't
Yeah.
have to do that. But something that to you kind of cues. I have two different crowns that I wear. I wear one when Persephone is with Demeter, and then one where Persephone is with Hades. So that kind
Okay.
of helps me to line up. And it also makes me feel regal. I feel like I'm tapping into that archetype within me, that persona. So once like crown is on, it's like showtime kind of thing.
Mhm.
So I feel like letting yourself kind of embrace play, if you're that kind of neurodivergent, that I know a lot of us want to gamify, or if we even feel like we want to lean into the performance element, then do that too. I think I think the thing to really notice is like when you're feeling either comparison, like if you're feeling like you're being watched by an invisible audience and they're judging you, or if you're feeling yourself kind of getting uncomfortable, then it's perfectly fine to stop. I think giving yourself permission to pause for a moment, come back to it later, I think works both for the mundane part of being neurodivergent and also the witchcraft practice part of it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so many good tips. I love that. I'm like, yes, yes, all of it. It's so great. Yeah, and I especially like, I mean, I resonate with all of it. I am somebody who has OCD. I was diagnosed fairly recently with it. Like it's something that I am just starting to realize about myself. I'm like, wow. And it has been helpful at identifying certain things that have been unsuccessful for me in a magical context. And for that information, I'm like so grateful of like, oh, yeah, like no wonder like this really rigid system of belief wasn't working for me because I was turning it into more. As somebody with OCD, I'm like, if I don't do this, something terrible is going to happen, right? Or if I don't follow this person's perspective or whatever. And it's funny because I've always been into chaos magic. I've always been somebody who is very free spirited, I guess you could say. Like, I don't like to be controlled. I don't like to have anybody tell me what to do. But at the same time, there's like this part of me that like, I call it like my overactive, like super ego, where it's like, that's the part of me that's like, these are the rules and you need to follow them. And I'm like, no, I don't want to. So I think I've always been somebody who has been working with that part of me, like really holistically, I guess. Like no, I'm going to explore chaos magic and do it my own way, or no, I'm going to try it out over here. But yeah, I really resonate with everything you say from that perspective. And I especially was going to say, I resonate with like the invisible audience thing, because for me, as I experience OCD, like that's what it feels like, is like people, unnamed forces that are unfriendly and unfamiliar, like watching and perceiving me. And so, yeah, I don't know. I would love to talk more about that piece because that's so interesting.
Yeah, that's a very special one, I think, to actually be able to name, because also as people who are aware of spirits that have deities that we work with, it's like it's a both and of, on one hand, we don't want to feel judged by the invisible audience, but also we know that there is entity around us at any given time.
Yeah.
So it is a little bit complicated that way. But something that I have been adopting, that I'm also working with some people in like my protective magic cohort on, because a lot of people are really worried about getting it wrong with their deities. And on
Mhm.
one hand, yes, respect them. They're not your pets for, petition and then you'll get whatever you want. Um, it's a lot more nuanced, and I think veneration should be the core of that kind of practice. But yeah, this idea of I'm going to get it wrong and then they're going to be mad at me, and other kind of, I think, very Catholic, very parental trauma, I want to say, kind of mindset coming through, that I've kind of given them a little bit of a window into what I've done recently, which is understanding that I have ADHD and that my capacity will kind of wax and wane. I have built into my petitions that I will do this for you for 7 days total. If I miss a day, I'm going to move it to the next day. And if for some reason I run out of peppermint tea, or something happens that just feels like it goes awry, or if I get a call that I have to be somewhere, life is going to happen. Understanding that that I live the life that I live and that I have the brain that I have, I will move it to the next day, or I will offer you this, or maybe I will veil for the weekend as well to kind of help to recoup, that I will show up in some way. And the understanding has been, okay, thank you. That I'm
Yeah.
being transparent, I'm naming what I can and can't do. And I think really allowing for kind of how you have had to adjust, like when you begin to know what your symptoms are and like, oh, that's why I do that. The way that you do that in your relationships, you could absolutely begin to bring into your spirit contracts, to how you're approaching how you show up for ritual. Maybe you do have one commitment that you do have to hold yourself to. Otherwise, let yourself be flexible and to kind of expand on what you consider like a good offering. Because I talked about this too recently in a video that I'm working on, that I got so annoyed with building something and I said, this is the devotional offering to you. I am so annoyed with this Allen wrench. I'm going to throw it across across the room. I hate building things. It really does. It does not offer me any dopamine. But in that moment, I took a moment to just say, I'm so glad I could be giving this to you all. It's really not fun, but it will make me feel better. And I feel like the energy will be better once we're all here. So I really think checking in with you and allowing for what you've been able to adopt from how you've had to begin accommodating yourself, or even asking more directly for what you need, letting that become more a part of your practice. Because I feel like it kind of went from I'll do my practice on the weekends to I can do a little of something every day, which feels so much better for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I so resonate. And yeah, and I think that this is something that a lot of witches don't think that they can do with their deities, because there is, or in other relationships or parts of their practice. I think, and I hear a lot from my clients and from listeners about how, like, when they first get into deity work, or even as they progress in their deity work practice, like, there is such a level of respect and reverence, and sometimes a little bit of like fear of the unknown and like of what the relationship is. And I definitely think that deity work is a mirror to all your relationships. Like, it will bring up things from your romantic relationships, your parental relationships, any type of relationship. And maybe even if a deity has an epithet or a role that is similar to that, like, maybe a love deity might bring up a little bit more of a romantic relationship mirror than, Hades, who I feel like I see him much more as like a parental figure. But either way, like, however you slice it, I think that a lot of people have a hard time saying, like, even just being like, yeah, I can say to my deity, like, hey, this is who I am. Like, I am a part of this relationship. This is what works for me. And we can change and edit things based off of that and create things that are completely like yours with that deity. I remember I was talking to Hades recently. I feel like I always go to Hades with like, I'm like, Hades, this, that, and the other thing. Like, I always have like some crisis that I'm bringing to him or whatever. And it's just a funny thing that we've been doing for all these years. And he's so stoic that I feel like, it's helpful for me to work with him through that. But, I remember he said like something recently to me, or I kind of got the message from him that, like, he's like, Angelica, like, I want to work with you specifically. Like, I don't want to work with who you think you should be or whatever that is. Like, and it was this acceptance thing of like, I accept you for what you bring to the table in this relationship. And it really like changed the way that I viewed it. And it's a lot like what you're saying around like making sure you are bringing that communication to the table, and your deities are going to accept you,
Mm. It's such a beautiful bit of permission. Like, that's something that so many of us neurodivergent people in any capacity want to hear, is that you don't have to show up in the way that you think that you should. It's about you as you are, and stepping into even more of who you are. Because yeah, you're brilliant. Don't never question that. And it is such a beautiful gift to be in relationship with these deities, that I think we kind of get so in our heads about it, in part because so much of the invisible audience, or even like, that was a thing that came up in my screening, was do you rehearse, or do you think about scripts in advance? And I said, yeah, I didn't know it was like novel until like a few years ago, that to be informed, to be instructed to go kind of rehearse facial expressions, because I didn't emote enough that that was a thing that came up. So I'd spend hours as a kid trying to figure out how to look like a human person. And I know it's like that just sounds so strange to talk about, like, especially because I'm like so smiley now and everything, but it's something that I had to learn how to do. So I think so much of kind of giving yourself that permission can be extended everywhere. And I think, yeah, I think it's beautiful, you noted too, that working with different epithets can kind of help to develop that stability that maybe is a little bit harder for you to tap into. Like with OCD, the OCD brain kind of does like a spider web thinking where we have you, in order for you to get the outcome, a bunch of things have to happen first. Otherwise, that
Mhm.
thing will happen. It's really hard, but to have this community and even kind of other witches to kind of help affirm, openly talking with other people about what they actually do versus what we think that they do, I think has been wonderful too, because it's like, no one is doing a 4-hour ritual every weekend. What if we could, if we really do enjoy it, but if it ends up being like a big drain, we our energetic waves are so different. Really be honest about what you can and can't do. And honestly, if like quote unquote the low magic is like what sparks joy, then let yourself have that. That it's about what will work best for you and feel good for you, instead of getting in our head about whether or not it looks like Chilling Adventures of Sabrina or other things that we feel like it has to be that way.
Yeah. Oh, such a good point. And yeah, and this is something that I think until I became like somebody who talks about witchcraft online for a living, like I always was like, nope, there's someone else out there that's doing it better than me. Or like there are people, like I was always under the impression for a long time that like, nope, there must be something that I'm missing, some information that I'm missing. I don't remember where I saw this. I was like, I'm kind of upset that I don't remember the source of this, but I think it was like on Threads, but it was somebody talking about the Eleusinian mysteries, and they were like, I don't like their perspective on it was like, I don't think that the Eleusinian mysteries were introducing all this new lore that is like life changing. I think it was really just about like the experience of like having this simple community ritual with other people and with the divine, and like, you know, everyone is talking about how transformative it was, and this and that. And I appreciated that. And I think that that can be applied to witchcraft in general, as like, I think the more that it resonates with you in that moment, the more comfortable you feel, like in terms of like just like your ability to be present in the moment and experience it. I think the more powerful it can become. And you're right, like it doesn't have to be a 4-hour ritual every Saturday, with the correct planetary hour and everything like that. And maybe it's better if it isn't, especially if you are somebody who struggles with something like perfectionism, and your power doesn't come from your perfectionism.
Definitely. I I love that very concept that maybe the Elistinian mysteries were about being among other people who just valued recounting the stories and being present and having time in the temple, having wine together, just that it was about community versus it being this like whole other kind of secret thing that we'll never be able to tap into. I I think we've all, yeah, I think that's kind of my small beef with the term unverified personal gnosis. On one hand, I'm glad we have it. On the other hand, I feel like it makes it so clinical, or it can negate how much we all have evolved in terms of our experiences with deities. Because if we get a bunch of Hades people in a room together, we will begin to notice that our unverified experiences have a lot of overlap between them.
Yeah.
That I don't know if this has been an experience for you, but I remember going to see The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, and then having this heavy, like, presence kind of shift. And I looked over and I saw Hades watching Clint Eastwood while we're watching The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. And I did a few times, like I looked over a few times and there was like a haze about it and just like fully locked in, not looking at me. He was very focused on Clint Eastwood. And I kind of played with that for a while, realizing, oh, I love Westerns. I love like the cowboy aesthetic. What if I make that like a devotional thing where we're going to watch like a Western film and then I just feel the present shift a little bit. Like that's something that feels so like comical to say like in a vacuum, but other people that I've talked to when I shared that, they're like, oh yeah, I was playing this one record and then it just like completely shifted and just immediately felt his presence, and that's just so beautiful. So I think that's the other thing too, is like even though we may not know all the details, I think we could comfortably say that that is the core to some extent, is like having community. And I think it's so important for not just witches, but neurodivergent witches to have that, because again, the invisible audience, we feel like we're not doing it right. That's really a lot of pressure to put on yourself.
Absolutely. I love that. And I love westerns and I love the western aesthetic and I don't know, I resonate. I resonate.
So
um
the Hades devotee to Western pipeline.
that like I don't know. I'm confused, but I love it and it does make like weird sense. Like I yeah, there's something so right about it. I'm kind of curious about your practice and especially as somebody with ADHD, or like as you said, um I resonate with the fact that like I also kind of struggle with switching in between things and I will completely forget about certain parts of my practice or certain things that I was supposed to be doing or things like that. So yeah, I'm just personally interested in hearing about like how you navigate like your practice with ADHD and how maybe more specifically like you work with the idea of like time and focus and how you've like oriented your practice around those things.
Yeah, definitely. I think something that does help a great deal is if you're kind of employing one of the kind of core principles of like set it and forget it. So you're not spending too much time thinking about something. Because a lot of neurodivergent people have like monotropic brains where instead of our brains being like a train with like several stops along the way, like it's the difference between the like Boston transit system and the commuter rail. Like one is going to make several stops, the other is going to take you over long stretches of time, get really really deep, but you're not going to get be able to stop very easily. And a lot of people with neurodivergence have the monotropic brain. So I have kind of spent some time figuring out like how do I hack that. So I have some things like I do have like a ritual playlist for getting me in the zone in a sense, getting me ready to go. I have a set of things to help me with that transition period, because if it's a work from home day for my day job, my muggle job, then I will spend some time not thinking about spreadsheets and beginning to think about, okay, I am a divine person. I'm divinely protected. I don't have to think about that right now. I will kind of help me get into a bit more of that headspace. So, aside from thinking about the correspondences of things, I think about whether or not it feels comforting or helps me to feel like I'm shifting a little bit.
Mhm.
So, aside from like lavender being good for relaxation, it's also very naturally protective. I do feel that when I burn it now, that it's helping my senses shift. That like if you know that you're a super smeller, then definitely utilize that. And then yeah, the playlist is really really big. The thing that I know we've kind of it's like I didn't realize my husband clocked it too, but if Lacuna Coil is playing, he knows I'm beginning ritual, and if Ghost is playing, then ritual is winding down.
I love
So yeah, I'm like, wow, it's like with him being like a Lutheran pastor elect, it's like, oh yeah, it's kind of like if you hear bells tinging, like, donging a certain way, it means, oh, hurry up and come to church. And if it's like ghosts, it's like, okay, church is over.
I love
So
that.
yeah, that kind of thing. So we'll do that. Um, I'll definitely utilize music that way. I having I'm a Sag Sun and Venus, so
Mhm.
I do really love ecstatic dance as a way of kind of getting me in. I I in my this feels so long ago, and yet not really. But back in 2013, 2014, I performed burlesque. So I didn't realize how much I was like shifting into the Gnostic state because people would be like, "Do you remember performing that?" I'm like, "No." I just like transported. And I wasn't me anymore. I was this other part of me, and I just was not there. So, like, utilizing that, I think, has always been very, very important to my practice without me realizing how much I was really tapping in any of that. So, I look at that and I will use like planetary days and times one of two ways. If I know that I'm having a kind of long week and I'm looking forward to it, I will use it as like an accountability buddy where I'm setting a date where I'm going to
Wow.
go and show up with Jupiter in my living room kind of thing.
Yes.
It's like we're going to be about that. Or if it's been a really heavy week, then I will look forward to doing my banner train on a Saturday. So like I will treat it as something to look forward to and build up to that. On the other hand, if it feels like another chore, another thing to do, then I may do parts of a spell or, write on that day. So I have the planetary correspondences, and
Mhm.
then I will come back to it the next week. The other thing too with having ADHD as like a femme presenting person is that during your period, the energy wanes. It's like,
Mhm.
oh no, I don't want to be perceived by anything, let
Yeah.
alone energies. Yeah, it's just that shift between it feels so like Jennifer's body, where like I feel like I'm Jennifer before I can go and feed on a boy. And then after I'm like glow up immediately after.
I love that. Yes. It's funny. I resonate with so much of this, and I do the same thing, and I have the same perspective on like in particular planetary magic because I agree, like, and I think for the listeners, like, it's helpful to know that, like, correspondences that you learn that, are a part of the study of the occult and like the system of the occult, like, those things can be helpful as long as they stay helpful, like, you don't need to protect those things and defend the dogma like in your own life, but if those things like work for you, or if you can use them to help you, like, okay, I love it, like, I'm having a date with Jupiter, you know we're doing it. Because I do the same thing where I'm like, okay, I know that I could do this spell realistically at any time, but that feels almost less freeing to me because then there's like, I'm like, no, I feel like I won't do it if that's the case, right? If I have like too much time, or too many options. And so it's helpful for me to go, okay, a great, fun, cool, Jupiterian time to do this Jupiter ritual is of course Thursday, during Jupiter hour, right? So it does help me, but it's not something that I am like, on the street corner like preaching about, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Oh, definitely. And to your point about thinking about timing, I really valued, I know maybe people in different time zones, it's not as relevant to them. But given that I'm in Chicago, that the Lupercalia ritual was like in the middle of the day, again, that mindset that don't think so much about what you just did. You
Yeah.
can hold space around it, but kind of like give yourself space to like let that be separate. And I really valued that because after that, I went to have Lupercalia brunch with my husband. I'm like, okay, we're going to have some wine. I ordered like a really beautiful salad. Like it was a wonderful time out. And it was the first time that I realized, oh, I can and should do my ritual in a set period of time, ideally during the day, make a plan for after, because with having ADHD, people assume that you can't pay attention. No, the problem might be that I loved doing that so much that my brain can't not think about it now. So I have to give myself something new and exciting to do to kind of give myself some space around that. And the other thing that I do love to do that I have to make sure that it's not, I want to make sure I don't burn my house down. So like be careful with like if it's a fire ritual, if it's a fire spell, be mindful about your fire safety. But yeah, I've noticed that I've enjoyed doing my spells like later in the evening because I'm winding down. I know I'm getting ready for bed. I try to have a bedtime kind of deal. And it's like, oh, I did not fixate on that the way that I normally would have. So kind of
Mhm.
thinking about either if you're really thinking about the magical and the mundane, and part of that is you're not going to overthink about the thing, then give yourself something else to do too. Like
Mhm.
be very intentional about that. And or if you're already gonna sleep anyway, then make sure that you can stack. I I like many people with ADHD love Atomic Habits by James Clear. So it's like, oh, I might as well make sure that candle is like almost close to done burning when I'm brushing my teeth and getting ready to wind down kind of thing. So like
Mhm.
leveraging those like windows of time I think can help too. Cause yeah, I've noticed that I am not, which I always feel is like a little bit counterintuitive, like, oh, I'm not thinking about it as much anymore. But I'm not in that headspace feeling like I'm still like in it quite the same way. Cause yeah, we're very imaginative. It's wonderful for visualization.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it can go the opposite direction very quickly.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that's something that it's a part of my practice too, or it's part of my life too, where like um, I find it in the past, and sometimes this will happen, so it'll flare up. But yeah, I find that like I I'm a Capricorn. I work a lot. Like there's a lot going on. I pack my schedule for really no reason. I don't really know why I do this. It's just what I've always done, and it's what I like. And I do find that sometimes I will be like, nope, don't have time for this magical thing, or don't have time for this thing, because in my brain I'm like confusing like the effort and like the process of achieving gnosis, which is like when you allow yourself to move from your normal like mundane state into a more magical state. I perceive that as taking a really long time, or taking a lot of effort, or being something that I just like cannot fit into my day in some way. And some days that's totally true. And I'm like, yep, it's the most magical thing I could do is like sleep and drink some tea and like watch or play Stardew Valley or something, right? And maybe you could argue that I am, getting into a little bit of a different mindset and state of mind by moving into that, and that's my chosen, ritual for the day. But yeah, I think that that's something that has stopped me in the past, is like just yeah, almost like confusing like the amount of time it's going to take with effort, or maybe making both of those things feel really unattainable, where I could just reframe the whole situation and be like, okay, let's pick something fun that gets me into the Gnostic state, like dance. And instead of downplaying me listening to like the new, album that I'm already obsessed with, instead of like downplaying that and being like, this isn't magical, doing like the habit stacking like you were talking about, and being like, I'm going to listen to Sabrina Carpenter, and I'm also going to do a glamour magic ritual at the same time.
Hmm.
I'm going to do it for 20 minutes. Once that's up, once I hit this song on the album, I'm out and I can transition to something else. So I think that that's been really helpful for me. I love habit stacking. I think yeah, like it's so useful in so many contexts, and I feel like I wish I heard about it. I hear about it more in magic. Like I feel like I don't hear about it as much in magic.
Yeah. And I love that you specifically said too that this is going to be my ritual for the day is like letting yourself have that without it being like conditional. Like it can be helpful sometimes though too to I think what's helped me as well is be able to name, because sometimes categories can help you potentially if you do like structure, is being able to define if you do one thing today, then what is it? Like, what's the simple? It's always going to feed you in some way. It's always going to feel like you got something out of the day. And it could be something that is kind of more traditionally magical. So I'll do like a 3 card pull for my little check-in with Persephone, and ideally that is a daily practice. I really haven't skipped a day for the most part if I think about the flow of a month. And I have kind of gotten to a point now where if I sit quietly in my car or if I'm in meditation, I kind of feel like there is still something that I'm receiving, even if it isn't that I maybe didn't pack my cards that day. Maybe I spend the whole day not even realizing I didn't pick them up. Things happen. But same thing, I try to think about if I'm going to have my coffee, then that could be when I do it because I'm probably going to do that anyway. So I guess that is kind of the through line is like if I didn't have my coffee, if I didn't pack them, I probably won't do it. And understanding that putting more pressure on yourself when you're already burnt out is only making it worse instead of kind of seeing how you can reframe experiences you're going to do anyway to make you feel better. Again, in the spirit of what's accessible to you. And yeah, I'm not necessarily like a I wouldn't call myself like a kitchen witch in that I could brew something for you perfectly and it'll solve all of your problems. But just realizing that there are metaphysical properties to potato, that there's metaphysical properties to oat. So if I'm making an oat milk latte anyway, then I can imbue that with intention, that it's as simple as what it was already doing and letting that be not only enough, but giving it the grace and significance that it needs. But yeah, I have spent a little time in my unmasking journey being able to say, here's what I will do when I have no spoons to do anything. And then here's what maybe is a bit more moderate for me that I know feels generative and also understanding too. Like I have a 12 house moon. I'm a 5-1 in human design. Banishing and clearing is extra important to me. And also being an Akashic Records reader, if I am left unchecked, the spirits will follow me home. So I've learned that. So I find ways of doing that are accessible, that feel good. And, it is still energy, but if it's something that I build in and I understand the kind of the components of it and also being flexible too, you know, there's some times where you're old, that's the thing too. It's like if you're calling it old, maybe you don't want to do it anymore. Maybe it's time to retire it.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe if it's not hitting anymore, then letting yourself doesn't sound like cool, maybe, but letting yourself like have a self audit where maybe it's just not doable for you to do a ritual. Maybe you enjoy making wards around your house. Maybe it feels better for you to have like jewelry that you work with that feels like, oh, that's it. And going back to smell, like I have amassed a lot of different perfumes. So I always have like an aroma about me, which on one hand, it could be overwhelming to people with sensitive noses, but it's what I need. It's what my
Yeah,
spirit needs.
I love that. Yeah, and I think all of it is like bringing up this idea for me of like your personal paradigm because in this idea of like the personal paradigm, I think it's talked about in a lot of different like spiritual contexts, but it's often talked about in chaos magic. And it's sort of this idea of like, you know, you are like uniquely interacting with the world and you are really the only person, and maybe we can look at astrology or human design or any of these systems to maybe help us understand like the back end of it. But it's like you are uniquely in these ways interacting with the world and other people in this specific way. And there are differences that you have, to other people. And there's different ways that you see your world and your role in it than other people. And with anything, there's no like one size fits all solution for literally anything at all. And witchcraft is hugely something that can vary and change. And we can philosophize and theorize and say, oh, this is what Agrippa was doing and in the Middle Ages, and this is what this person was doing. Let me try this. But ultimately, for me as a witch, it's been so powerful to just like default to my paradigm. And that changes on a daily basis. Like one day I am Venus just went retrograde. So one day I am down and out on Venus's underworld journey. And I'm like, whoa, my paradigm today is feeling very different than it was last week. And so I need to adapt for that. And then there's another week where I'm like, I just read about this ceremonial magic ritual that I really want to try. And I fully have the energy to like set the whole thing up. And I'm like, that was so fun. And that was so exciting and cool. And so I think that's what I would say to the listeners is just like, remember that like you don't have to listen to anybody but yourself, and that you know what's going on. And if you're somebody who's like, well, I don't know, that's why I'm trying to figure it all out with witchcraft and with this and that and listening to podcasts. It's like, I would really invite you to go on the exciting journey of like interacting with your paradigm in a more intentional way. What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. And to your point about if you feel like there's a lot of information, like you're grasping, then like there are periods where I am in my learner mode, where I am so stoked to like I did your glamour magic class as well last year. Like, oh, I want to learn. And this year is like a bit more of a blend where I am still learning, but I am trying to be intentional about what am I doing? And does it feel like what I actually want to keep? Does it feel like what my magic actually is? And you're going to wax and wane like capacity wise, but if it all feels all so heavy all the time, then it's okay to change it up, to do something different. So much of, let's say, sigil work, like I did a really like cozy collab with somebody where I taught them a method for making a sigil. And I said, if you don't like the way I taught that, draw what feels right to you. And then my friend teaches embroidery. So we were able to teach people how to stitch it into their clothing or whatever they brought with them that felt resonant. And it felt for so many people like, oh, I felt excited to do my craft again. I've been feeling like it has to look a certain way or it has to be only a ceremonial. I'm like, no, we can have like muffins and coffee on a Saturday. And I can pull cards around what you're wondering. We can talk about it. We can figure it out. And it can be cozy. It doesn't have to be always, all the time, something that is elevated, that is serious. So much of magic can be play. I mean, like sex magic is a thing. So it's like it's not just furrowed brow. Like maybe it is for you. I don't want to take that away from you. But any listeners that are like, excuse me, I love scowling the whole time, by all means do that. But
yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with like the levity and it, finding what really, again, feels like that full bodied, I am in it kind of thing, and it's going to be different. Sometimes it'll be more reluctant than others. That's okay. Just giving yourself that, again, we've talked about it, permission and self-acceptance, like it doesn't have to be perfect. And I know that's easier said than done, but yeah, just we could all be kinder to ourselves in general.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think I agree with all of this. And I like the idea too about collaboration with people, because that's something that, sometimes it does feel a lot to be like, okay, what kind of ritual am I going to do today? Or like, I want to do a money spell, but what is that going to look like? Or I want to learn a new type of magic, but I literally have no idea what I'm feeling drawn to. I think that for me, it has been really helpful to, you know, work with other people, and not in like a I need them to tell me what to do kind of way, just in like a collaborative, like, ooh, this person seems really excited about this type of magic. I want to see what's going on and why they like this so much. Or like I took like a couple classes recently about different random topics and like herbalism and magic and various things, and it got me like on this kind of new thing where I am making a lot more. Like I took like an herbalism, like salve making, like oil making class. And I was like, wow, I can't wait to make all these like new magical curios. And it was something that I probably wouldn't have done and been excited about doing unless I went to that class. And so I would also, for the listeners, like, don't feel like it all has to come from you internally all the time. It can be like, I'm bringing this perspective in. I'm allowing like this, teacher to give me like their perspective and see if I resonate with it. And I think from there, it can make things really helpful and collaborative, and you don't feel like you're doing it all alone. Because I think that maybe sometimes that's how people feel when they feel like, oh, I just have to focus on me and my paradigm. It's like, it doesn't just have to be about you and nobody else. Like you can bring other perspectives in.
Oh, I love how you said that, because I think a misconception that people have about me, because depending on how they've met me or know me or what have you, I think there's this feeling of like, I am ascended master and I must not ever need to be held in a ritual experience. And it's like, no, that's part of why I'm a coven member. I will go to other either events or to learn, to kind of continue to do that. I have a ninth house Mars, so I can't not learn. I will try to put parameters around it, but no, that's absolutely true. Is like letting, I think the key is, let yourself be informed. But if you feel like you're being influenced, quote unquote, and that's making you feel like you're self-doubting, then that's maybe when to reel it back. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with looking to someone to either guide you or teach you something new, because that's so much of how my glamour magic has, shaken out over the years, to the point where I don't look like Hedy Lamarr, but I had like a framed photo of her on an altar. And my nephew saw that photo and he's like, oh, it's Deity Emmy, which is like Spanish for like, it's Auntie Emmy. And I didn't look like her exactly, but I had enough of the energy that he associated Hedy Lamarr with me. And that was absolutely the goal at the time. And yeah, just like that kind of, you can play with it, but I think, yeah, checking in with yourself, because if it's beginning to make you feel bad, then I'd begin to reel it back and see, why are you feeling that way? Otherwise, yeah, I love to kind of take the back seat sometimes, because if I'm feeling uninspired, if I don't know what to do for a certain festival because it's not really as much a part of my practice, it's like, please do guide me. I don't have to be on all the time. I'd like to be along for the ride too.
Yes. 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 And that's why I'm so glad that we talked about this together today. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Emmy, for coming on. Where can people find you and what are you up to these days?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at La Soy Emmy, little underscores in between, and at my website, Soy Emmy, spelled like the award, is like the easiest way to kind of help break it down for people. And yeah, otherwise, you can find all of my links through there. I have a bunch of different projects going on. I have my protective magic course going on. We are a few modules in, but in the spirit of a lot of people being neurodivergent and wanting kind of ongoing accountability throughout the year. Even though the modules will kind of wrap up in a few weeks, we're going to continue to do live calls through the entire year. So
Mhm.
yeah, feel free to message me if you have any questions, or if you have any questions about any of the other things that I do. I'm an open book, so feel free to reach out.
Yes, thank you so much, Emmy. And we'll put your links in the show notes as well so you can easily find Emmy if you are listening to this. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you. Had such a fun time chatting.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate it.
Yes, yes. And we will talk very soon. Thanks to all the listeners who are listening. And yeah, goodbye. This weekend, we have a really fun event happening in the Patreon Coven tier. I'm holding a Venus retrograde workshop. And since it's also the day that Mercury goes retrograde on March 15th, and that's the day of the workshop, we're also going to be talking a bit about the similar cycles of the Mercury and Venus retrogrades. We're going to do a really exciting guided trance meditation to meet with Venus and disseminate some of the knowledge of this retrograde. If you want to get access to exclusive content and live events, join Patreon at the Coven tier. And speaking of my patrons, let's do a shout out. So thank you so much to Jamie, Cheryl, Emma, Alexis, Alessandra, Ashley, Luna, Taylor, Jordan, Chelsea, Quinn, Megan A, Megan M, Melissa, Natalie, Jen, Carrie, Lauren, Kayla, Lindsay, Sarah, Quinn, Peony, Joanna, Megan S, Megan R, Callie, Nina, Irene, Chelb, Haley, Kristen, Desiree, BFG, Emmy, Hannah, Georgia, Adri, Liz, Kay, Esty, Kristen, Shell, Veronica, Isabella, Lanes, Junie, Elena, Jojo, Teddy, Paige, Shania, Crystal, Mina, Kimberly, Finian, and Anna. Thank you so much for being patrons in the Diary or Coven tier, and thanks for listening. We'll talk soon. Bye.